Special guest, Edward Cartee, men's assistant coach from the University. Welcome, sir. Love having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead and start. If you could actually let these young millennials know as far as your ideas and thoughts on choosing a school or university or college.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you to Coach Kerwin and Coach Adriano and Brianna for having me. And guys, thanks for logging on to listen and hopefully to ask questions. As he said, I'm the men's soccer assistant coach at Trinity here locally, one of the top Division III soccer programs in the nation and a top academic school as well. I'm not originally from this area, though I've been living here a long time, going into my 9th year as the Trinity assistant after having played at Trinity for 4 years. But I'm originally from Greensboro, North Carolina, and I lived and trained at the IMG Soccer Academy in Bradenton, Florida for 2 years, and was recruited from there to come play at Trinity. So I went through this process that you guys are going to find out about tonight in order to end up where I am now. Being a collegiate student athlete is an awesome experience. The competition and the opportunities to, compete nationally and being a member of a team and all of the benefits that you already experience of that, but elevated even more because you're not just seeing your teammates a couple hours a day, but you're actually living with them and spending half a day or more with them in many cases. That brings with it a lot of commitment, but also a lot of benefits. There are some challenges in terms of time management, but there's a lot of value to doing it in terms of building your resume and networking and making connections. So how do you put yourself in that situation? Well, you want to find a school first and foremost that is a good academic fit for you. That involves considering the academic level of the school. Are they regionally ranked? Are they nationally ranked? And also, if you have an idea of what you might want to study, thinking about your intended major. And are they well known or for being particularly strong in the department that you might want to concentrate on? Along with academic level, you obviously have to think about soccer level. This is going to require you to do a little bit of research, though, because soccer, unlike football or basketball or some other NCAA sports, the level of play does not correspond necessarily to Division I being the highest and Division II being the second and Division III being the third. You're really blessed here in San Antonio to have a Division I program in Incarnate Word, a Division II program in St. Mary's, a Division III program in Trinity, also an NAIA program at Our Lady of the Lake. And all 4 of those programs frequently scrimmage each other in our spring seasons or in preseason, and those tend to be very even competitive matches. So you need to look at a team's actual style of play and level of performance rather than just going off of labels in that respect. And of course, I mentioned Our Lady of the Lake and NAIA. There's more out there than just NCAA schools, and I'll come back to that later in the conversation, I think. But academics, soccer, and then you've got to look at some personal preference factors as well. Size of the school, geographic location of the school, and some of these other things that are subjectively going to be important to you. If you hate cold weather, then you shouldn't be looking at schools on the Canadian border. Some of you might not have strong preferences about those things and you're more open, but you need to be honest with yourself about what type of environment you think you would be happiest in. Trinity is a smaller school with small class sizes, which I think is of tremendous benefit educationally. But if you guys, if some of you go to some of the larger 6A schools in this area, your high school might be larger than Trinity. So is that an environment that you would be excited about being in, or do you want to be in a large state school and go to football games with 100,000 people on the weekend? Those are some differences that you've got to think about. The last thing is cost. And if you pick the school for the right reasons and pick an appropriate choice based on your academics and your soccer, cost is usually not going to be a concern. You're usually going to be able to be covered with academic scholarships that you qualify for, or possibly athletic scholarships, although you should not rely nearly as much on that for soccer, as I'm sure we'll discuss more later. But cost is obviously important because it has to be affordable for your family to go, and that particularly is important to think about in terms of private schools versus state schools, and in-state versus out-of-state. Because if you're looking at a California state school, for example, for a California player, that their tuition could be a third or even 25% or 20% of what their tuition might be for an out-of-state student. And California, for example, you're not able to receive athletic. You're able to receive athletic, but you're not able to receive academic or need-based scholarship if you're an out-of-state student looking to go to a California state school. So, that those are factors that you can research just from schools' websites, and find out, hopefully a list of 10 to 15 schools that seem like they could be a good holistic fit for you and your family in those different categories.
Ed, you touched upon it a little bit, because I as well as you, we're dealing with the youth players, and it sounds exciting going out of state. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on the out of state, like how many out of state players you guys may have on your roster, or some of the differences as far as I don't know if you can even repeat it a little bit, because I'm not sure if they caught all that. I thought it was fantastic information as far as the out of state tuition, as far as like what makes me different if I want to go out of state or bring in an out of state player.
Well, first of all, I would encourage you to consider out-of-state options. Don't limit yourself just to Texas, because there are not a whole lot of elite college soccer programs in this state relative to how many elite youth soccer players there are in this state. So Texas is a net exporter of talent in terms of youth to the college game. And so don't limit yourself. Be willing to consider things that might be outside of your comfort zone. With that said, you should look at the roster of the team at the school that you're looking at and see how diverse that roster is in terms of where they are drawing players from. Trinity has players from 6 foreign countries and 6 other states besides the state of Texas, but that's not very typical for a lot of the Division III schools in this state that we would compete against. Colorado College in our conference might look a little bit more similar to that, but you just want to evaluate where have they been recruiting players, and does it appear like it's mostly in-state or regional, or do they have players from all across the country? You can also look at the level where they've recruited those players from. Does it seem like most of them, and I know this is changing now, but looking at who they've recruited in the past, are most of their roster players DA players, or do they mostly seem to come from other levels of club soccer? Those are all interesting things to consider. From a recruiting standpoint, to market yourself to an out-of-state school, video and showcase tournaments and ID camps become even more important, because it's much harder for an out-of-state coach to see you as regularly, to evaluate you. Whereas, I can come out and see one of your league games perhaps multiple times over the course of a season, whereas these other coaches are only going to have a few opportunities to evaluate you. And so there becomes a higher priority placed on that. And that is also a financial consideration, as Coach Kerwin mentioned, because marketing yourself and to those schools, visiting those schools, all of it becomes a little bit more logistically and financially complicated potentially, depending on when you're planning to visit, how interested they are in you. Some of those factors could be offset, but it is possible that is going to be a burden that falls primarily on you, because you have to sell yourself to the school rather than just hoping that they come after you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I like what you said earlier, that Trinity has the ability, us being in San Antonio, where we have multiple different levels of soccer. And I think that's fantastic that it's very competitive and some of the games are extremely close. Can you touch upon, because I know there's state-funded schools, private schools, junior college schools. Little pop quiz for you. Could you elaborate a little bit on the cost, and maybe that would help, different families may need, financial assistance, FAFSA. Some may not have heard that, so I kind of brought up real quick the differences as far as how I choose my school as far as financial for my family a little bit, maybe looking at this level versus that level.
Yeah, so start by going online, because you can look at a school's admissions page on their website and they'll show what their tuition and room and board is. In many cases, they will have a financial aid calculator on their site, or you can even Google that. But the factors are going to be how much academic scholarship you might qualify for based on high grades and high test scores. That can be a way to help pay for your college education, and it's the most important way by far. If your family qualifies for financial need based off of the government form FAFSA, as Coach Kerwin mentioned, some schools may also require an additional form called the CSS profile, but that information will be on the website, and sometimes you can fill that out in advance. Oftentimes that's something that you would fill out as part of the application process itself, but you would be able to see a statement on there whether the school is committed to meeting demonstrated need, for example. So if you use that estimated family contribution EFC calculator that you might be able to Google or that they provide, and you input some data about what your income and expenses are as a family, and it spits out a number, give or take a few thousand, probably the school is going to be combining grant and loan to try to get to that figure. That's purely from the admission side. If you are a player that's looking at a Division I or a Division II program, they also, or an NAIA program, they also have the ability to offer athletic scholarships. So that could potentially offset costs further, but different divisions also have different rules about whether or not they can stack those types of scholarships. And just in general, soccer programs don't have very many athletic scholarships to use. So the rules have changed a couple of times, but just as a general rule of thumb, even though the exact numbers are slightly different for Division II versus Division I, as a rule of thumb, a fully funded Division I program is going to have 9 scholarships probably. So if you think about dividing 9 scholarships across a team of 25 to 30 players, you can very quickly figure out that national team players might qualify for a full scholarship, and most really talented but mere mortal soccer players are going to get a percentage of an athletic scholarship if they get anything at all. But for a coach that has scholarships to use, he's probably going to give a 30% scholarship here and a 20% scholarship there, and try to divide that money up in such a way that it benefits everyone as much as possible. But if you're a great student and you qualify for a large pile of money out of another pile, why would I spend my pile as a coach when we could get that taken care of from one of the university's piles, and I could make my pile go a little bit further and use it with somebody else? So you don't really want to rely on athletic scholarships covering much, if any, of a percentage of a cost of your education. High grades and high test scores are the way to go about that. And then if your family has need, then you can usually be confident that schools are going to try to chip in and help with that if you're an academic qualifier. Some of that would be in the form of grant, and some of that would be in the form of student loans. But that's a conversation you would probably be having, after you've applied and are having serious conversations with a coach that's recruiting you for a roster spot.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Leading into the next one, recruiting timetable. Speaking for boys, I know it's different for the males and females. Girls, it may start earlier, men a little bit later. Can you kind of give me some insight or give them insight as far as when it starts for the boys and when it will really reach a high peak?
Yeah, everything I say for the boys, you can probably go at least 1 year earlier for the girls, although that's changing to a little bit later now in some cases. But we are typically starting to evaluate players as sophomores here in Texas, but if an out-of-state player, it might be hard to see them or be able to pay attention to them at a showcase tournament until their junior year. The junior year is for sure the key year for recruiting. So getting started with thinking about your list and contacting coaches as a sophomore is really good. If you're midway through your junior year now and you're listening to this, or if it's later, don't panic. There are still roster spots available. But if you are younger than that, don't wait until the middle of your junior year to start. A lot of the top Division I programs are setting roster spots aside for players in the second semester of their junior year. Although you can't officially sign until you're a senior in most cases, oftentimes verbal commitments for top players are happening that early. And then the first semester of the senior year is also a critical time for visiting schools that you're seriously interested in if you've narrowed your list down from 10 to 15 to 3 to 5. And then the timeline's going to vary by school, but for us at Trinity, as a Division III school that does compete for a lot of the same recruits that would be interested in a D1 or a D2 program, but is definitely on a later timeline than most of those programs would be. We're typically trying to have the core of our recruiting class done by Christmas with early decision applications or early action applications, and then filling out the remainder of the roster between Christmas and spring break, if you're not already getting everything you need before then.
Excellent.
Sorry, Coach, just real quick. If you guys just jumped on the call, can you make sure that you're muted just for right now so we can hear all the questions? Awesome. And then towards the end, we'll open up and we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Going further, Ed, when would you advise these PSAs as far as contacting coaches? When is a good time of season? Obviously not during the season.
Well, there are different rules about when coaches and how coaches can respond to you, but there's no regulations restricting when you can contact them. So I would say that, and again, for girls, it might need to be earlier, but for boys, freshman year is probably a little bit early because you have so much development still to do that, maybe that's somewhat premature, but definitely I would encourage sophomores to start sending emails, and junior year for sure, because you want to establish name recognition with the coach and get on their radar. We work really hard to try to bring in the best recruiting classes that we can, but we don't recruit the best players. We recruit the best players that we know about. And we do our part to try to find out, but you putting yourself in front of a coach is extremely valuable. You're doing some of that work for them and getting a head start over other players that might not have shown the same initiative. So I would say sending emails to coaches even as sophomores is good, and definitely going into your junior year and in the first part of your junior year. You should be politely persistent. Coaches are extremely busy, and we may not always respond to your first communication, and you shouldn't read into that means that we're not interested. If you've reached out 3 or 4 times and we haven't gotten back to you, at that point, maybe you start to wonder if you need to cross that school off the list, or at least move it down. But don't give up too quickly or too easily. Follow up with an email or a phone call the next week. Most coaches prefer kind of progressing from emails then to phone calls and possibly texts, but that does depend on the personality of the coach and also your age in terms of how we can legally contact you, depending on what grade you are and what division that school and coach belongs to.
I like what you had to say about becoming or getting on their radar. Excellent. What are some qualities that you guys look for?
So qualities that are important to a coach, obviously, talent and ability are very important. You're going to recruit players that you think have a contribution to help your team win as soon as possible. The NCAA Division 1 and 2 and NAIA have an eligibility center that you have to sign up for in order to sign and commit to play with their school. That doesn't have to be done before you begin the recruiting process, but it's just a hurdle that you have to jump through at some point. And so that's something else to make sure that you don't forget about doing. Academic success is critical. Obviously, when I go to a showcase tournament and I get a profile book and every team at the tournament has a page and every player on every team is listed, and I get that on Friday night at the coach's social before the tournament starts on Saturday morning, the first thing that I'll do is go back to my hotel room and take a black magic marker and cross out every single player whose grades and test scores are too low for my school. It doesn't matter if Lionel Messi is on the team, if his GPA and SAT or ACT don't qualify for my school, I can't recruit him, and I shouldn't even tempt myself by watching him or her. So you got to make sure that academic success qualifies you, and then even if you're looking at a school that doesn't have as high of an academic standard and you are a qualifier, if that coach thinks that you're a fairly similar prospect to another player who is much stronger academically, that better student athlete is more likely to be admissible with a better scholarship, saving them money, is more likely in their minds to be someone who's going to be low maintenance and not be an issue or an eligibility risk in terms of being available for selection and handling the stress of college life off the field and how that affects performance on the field. So whether it's qualifying to even be considered or whether it's stacking up favorably compared to the other prospects, academic success is critical. Coaches are also looking for attitude and interpersonal skills and character, because we're not just recruiting to build a soccer team, but you're recruiting to build a family. Like I said earlier, you're going to spend at least half of a day together with your teammates for the next 4 years, and the team already exists. There's 20-something players that are already together, that already have a culture and a chemistry, and it works. So you are not more important than those 20 returners, that core of the team that the coach already has. So if you're going to be able to come in and fit in and make that group better, that's exactly what that coach is looking for. But if they feel like there's going to be personality clashes, that you're not a good fit for the culture, that your attitude, work ethic, teachability aren't right for their program, those are going to be major red flags, even for players with elite ability. And you're being evaluated all the time. How you conduct yourself on the bench, your interactions with your teammates and with your parents before and after the game, the professionalism of your communications with a coach, all of these things are being evaluated. And, I say that not to make you nervous, but you do need to be aware that your behavior at all times counts, because we're looking for someone who's going to be a good 24/7, 365 representative of our university and contributor to our program. It is not just the 2 hours that you're together on the field for practice, or how you perform in the 2/3 of a game that you got to play. That's important, but there's a lot more to it than just that.
Coach Kerwin, you're muted.
My apologies. Jump around just a tad. Wonderful information again. Could you elaborate a little bit more on some do's and don'ts when on emailing coaches?
Yes, do put your name and your grad year in the subject line. That's one of the most important things that the coach needs to know about you right away. Do make sure that you personalize the email to the coach and the school that you are sending. Much of the email can be copied and pasted from a template that you already have ready, but you need to be very careful when you do that it doesn't come in with different fonts where it's obvious that it was copy pasted, or you're in such a rush to do this that you forget to change the name of the school or the coach's name from the last coach and school that you sent that email to. So you need to, take care and proofread and make sure that that's right. The email doesn't need to be super long. If it's longer than 3 paragraphs, the coach is probably not going to read all of it anyway. So you want to probably have 3 short, impactful paragraphs. You want to introduce yourself in the first paragraph, and basically the point of the first paragraph is, why should the coach be interested in you? You're going to recap a lot of the same bullet points that you would have on your profile or resume, but it's kind of like a journalist. You have to come in with a hard lead and sell yourself right out of the bat. All of the important information about your club team, your grad year, your position, your GPA, your test scores needs to be in that first paragraph in just a couple of sentences. This is the hook to get them to keep reading. The second paragraph cannot be template written. The first paragraph you can more or less reuse for every email, your initial emails, that is. The second paragraph only needs to be a couple sentences, but that needs to be about the school, why you are interested in that particular school. So you need at least 1 sentence about the school. I really like Trinity because of its engineering program and its small class sizes. And you need to have something about the soccer program. You're writing to UC Santa Barbara. Congratulations, coach, on reaching the 13th NCAA tournament in your program's history, or whatever the case might be. But even if this is something fairly basic that you got from just a few minutes on their website, it shows that you have a genuine interest in their school, and that this is not just a generic email where you're throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And then the third paragraph, what do you want the coach to do having read the email? And in most cases, the answer to that question is you want to get them to come see you play. So this is where you attach a highlight video to pique their interest. This is where you include a link to your schedule or to the schedule at a showcase tournament that's coming up where you want them to go see you. Because there needs to be some sort of obvious action step where you're giving them the opportunity to follow up on any interest in you that your email might have generated. So in brief, 3 paragraphs, hit them hard, short and sweet. and make sure that you use good grammar and write in such a manner that the coach believes that you could be a college student.
Excellent. Going further from that, so now they've written a solid email. The coaches have taken the bait. They've seen them play. They're interested. Can you inform the group unofficial visit versus official visit?
So unofficial visit just means that you pay for your expenses to go there, and there's an unlimited number of those that you can take. You can go to as many different schools on an unofficial visit as you would like, and you can also go back to the same school on unofficial visits as many times as you would like. You are only allowed 5 official visits. Those are either mainly or completely financed by the school, depending on the travel arrangements and distance. But that's when the school is paying for either part of all of your travel, and when they're paying for all of your expenses on the visit besides just a meal. They can pay for a lunch for you and your parent if you go on an unofficial visit and you meet with them. But beyond that, it becomes official. You're only allowed 5 of those, and you can't use 2 of them. You can't go back to the same school twice, although I don't know why you would want to. In reality, you shouldn't be concerned about using up all 5 of yours, because this is not something that you should even contemplate doing until you have whittled your list down to 3 to 5 schools that you're seriously interested in and that are showing a serious level of interest in you in return. You usually don't ask to take an official visit. You might be the initiator for an unofficial. Usually the coach is going to invite you to come on the official as a token of their level of seriousness of interest in you. And if you are a talented enough player that you've got more than 5 schools inviting you to come on an official visit, then you would probably want to be smart about using those for schools that are further away. You might not need to take an official visit to Incarnate Word, even if they offer it to you, because you might prefer to use that official visit to go visit Notre Dame. The expenses and logistics involved in those 2 official visits are drastically different. So if you are legitimately worried that you will run out, then you should be smart in how you allocate them. For most players, that's not going to be a problem you're going to encounter, but you do need to understand what the terms mean. You definitely want to visit any school that you are seriously considering going to. And I know that's a little bit harder right now with the virus situation, but a lot of schools, like I know Brianna put links to virtual tours for Trinity, for example, on the webpage that was linked for this chat. But go online and learn as much as you can. But assuming that things go back to normal at some point in the near future, hopefully, you want to go meet the coach in person, meet the players in person, see the campus, sit in on a class if you can. Don't just rely on the theory or the marketing materials. Even if they're telling the truth, you need to go kick the tires for yourself.
Excellent. Time of year that you guys have your ID camps, or encouragement to some other ID camps like Exact Camp, stuff like that? Do you see those as a benefit to the players?
ID camps are huge because you're accomplishing at least 2 things at once. You are doing the coach's job for him. I'm not having to go see you play. You're coming to me, so you're making it easier. You're putting yourself in front of me, and I am going to be able to evaluate you. And I know that you are displaying a high level of interest in the school because you can only go to so many camps, time-wise and money-wise. So it shows interest in the school, where I know if I recruit you, you're more likely to be interested in potentially coming to the school. So ID camps are really important, but you obviously can't go to dozens of them. And so when you've narrowed your list down, and when you're, thinking about camps to choose for the summer between the end of your junior year and the start of your senior year, that's really critical. Earlier than that, you're going to want to think about how you can maximize exposure. So maybe looking at ID camps that bring in a lot of college coaches for their staff, as opposed to just going to one school's ID camp where you only get seen by their staff. That's obviously a great gesture for that individual school, but you don't get as much bang for your buck, especially if you're, heading into your sophomore year or heading into your junior year. I don't want to speak negatively about any company or organization, but some camps are much better than others. And in general, I would recommend for you to focus on camps that are hosted at a school that bring in a lot of other quality staff from that region or that level. In general, you're usually better off looking at those types of ID camps than you are ID camps that are run by camp companies. There are some exceptions to that, but as a general rule, I would say that your money and your time are probably better spent if you're actually on a university's campus at a camp that's sponsored by a school. In terms of timing, Division I programs that have 4, 5, 6 assistant coaches, and some of them are dedicated specifically to recruiting, they're going to have the resources to recruit more year-round. A school like Trinity that has a staff of 2 to 3 coaches, we're doing almost no recruiting in the fall, which can suck sometimes for y'all because you might have a home game against a good team in your league and you're 10 minutes away from our campus, and we're just not able to come because we're too busy with our own program, although you should still let us know and we'll do what we can. But recruiting for us is mainly going on in the winter, spring, and summer. Almost every single college program is going to have some form of winter or spring ID combine. Those tend to be one-day camps that are less expensive, and that can be a great way to get exposure, particularly if you can do more of those and they're on a weekend and they don't conflict with high school or club or anything you have going on. And you can do more of those because it's more cost efficient, obviously. Maybe combine it with a visit also, since potentially you could do that while school is in session. And then most programs are going to have an ID camp over the summer. That's typically going to be 2 or 3 or 4 days. Very physically intense, usually. You play too much soccer in too short of a period of time, but just because it's the only opportunity that the coaches have to see you and evaluate you. But for the standpoint of being able to show at your best in those settings, and also for your own injury prevention, you want to make sure that you do really good preparation fitness-wise heading into those camps. You will not show well, and you are at a greater risk of getting hurt if you go into those camps without having followed a good conditioning program, because it is too much. And we run those camps and we know it's too much, but it's just the only way, particularly if you've got kids traveling in from across the country or even internationally. You have to maximize how much you can see them. So that's why it is the way it is, but you just got to know what you're getting into.
Excellent. Good. Are you a fan of PSAs emailing you or trying to contact you weekly, daily, or once a month? What would you advise them to do? Trying to get be seen by schools or get some kind of feedback, like they haven't responded yet. Should I keep bugging them or not? Or should I get the hint? Like, it's been months. I guess they don't like me.
That's a great question. And I would say probably after you send your initial email, maybe follow up the next week. And then whether it's follow-ups or just check-ins and maintaining communication with a coach that did respond, I would say somewhere between every couple weeks to once a month. Daily and weekly are both probably way too much, unless you actually have something to say. If you have a new highlight video, or you just got a improved test score back or something, this is a good excuse for you to send an email. So strategically, you probably want to try to plan it out where every couple of weeks you've got something new to tell the coach, and it gives you an excuse to be in regular communication with them, as opposed to just pestering them with no real point to the email other than saying hello. So don't go, multiple months without checking in, and neither you nor we probably have the time for you to check in more regularly than once a week. So I would say every 2 to 3 weeks, once a month, depending on how young you are and how much interest they seem to be showing.
Excellent. Could you describe a day in a life of a student athlete?
It's going to vary a little bit, obviously, but I'll just give you the Trinity answer. And it's a good question for you to ask any coach that you are speaking to. And this is an excuse for an email or a phone conversation right there. But at Trinity, we don't practice in the morning the way some Division I programs might do. We normally practice in the evening. So we ask our players to take most of their classes in the morning or the afternoon. And then mid-afternoon, most of the guys are heading over to the locker room, getting treatment in the training room, working with our strength coach in the weight room, and then heading out to the field to practice, training for 2.5 hours, showering, changing, eating dinner together, and then going to do homework or hang out. During the season, we normally play Friday and Sunday games. So Monday would be a day completely off. You might go see the trainer, but other than recovery, no soccer obligations, focus on your school and rest. Tuesday would be a lighter session or even still a recovery session for guys that might have played most or all of both games, and possibly a medium to heavy session for guys that didn't play as many minutes. Wednesday, the whole team would train together heavy. And then Thursday would be a lighter training session. It might be a travel day, so you might just be getting the trip out of your legs, or you might be working on set pieces for an hour at home before a Friday game. Saturday would be a training session only for guys who didn't play at all, but a recovery session for everyone who played in the match the day before, possibly some sort of classroom session or tactical lecture in terms of preparing for the next day's opponent. Play Sunday, and that would repeat from Labor Day weekend through Thanksgiving, and then you're into exams. It would take up pretty much the whole fall semester. In the spring, Division I and Division II programs have more flexibility to have weight room workouts and conditioning sessions in addition to soccer sessions, although there's still a limited number of hours that they can work with you each week. For Division III, half of the semester you would just be working with our strength coach, and the captains would be leading training sessions on their own. And then we have 5 weeks that we're allowed to have official practice with you during the spring. So that usually is the latter half of the spring, from after spring break through the beginning of the exam period. And that's pretty much the exact same rhythm as a in-season week, except you aren't traveling for multiple games every weekend. So you still have more flexibility time-wise. A lot of programs might have study halls or some sort of academic component that's built into that as well. At Trinity, we don't recruit any at-risk student athletes, and there's a lot of great resources offered by the university and every department, and professors are having office hours where you can get the help you need without us needing to have a study hall athletically. But a lot of D1 programs are going to have an academic advisor that's specifically assigned to your team to make sure that you are getting the tutoring and making the progress that you need to make for the purpose of graduating, obviously, but first and foremost, from their standpoint, keeping you eligible so that you're available to play.
Question outside the box a little bit that might be a little different than the norm. Do you guys take walk-ons?
It's very difficult for you to be in that situation now anymore. I guess theoretically the answer is yes, but before the internet, a player might show up on campus that you've never seen or communicated with before. And so you have a tryout opportunity for them to walk on because you need to evaluate them. That's almost impossible now, nor is there really any good excuse for that. So the walk-on is a dying breed, not so much because we aren't willing to give that type of a player an opportunity, but if you're showing up on campus and you've never communicated with us, why? That tends to speak to lack of engagement or commitment. And so even though the answer is theoretically yes, in reality, it usually no, because if you're a player at a good level and you're coming to a school, it's almost impossible for you not to be seen, and to sort of create that scenario, if that makes sense. And most rosters are going to be either completely full or almost full. No one still has roster spots available on the first day of preseason. So if you are in that situation, you are trying to get the coach to decide to add an additional spot to his roster for you. You're not trying out to fill an empty spot.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Almost ready to open up for some open questions, Bree?
Yeah, we're you ready to start taking questions?
Up to Ed. I mean, I have
Yeah.
tons and tons of questions, but I want to see what these guys have on their mind a little bit.
We need to do that for sure. And then at some point at the end, I'd like to bring it back and just chat a little bit about Trinity specifically. But why don't we go ahead and do recruiting questions now?
Okay.
Perfect. If you guys want to chat your questions, or if you want to unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to direct your questions to Coach Cartee.
Are the ID camps by invite only?
In most cases, you're not allowed to do that. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be some players there who were specifically invited, but almost all ID camps have to be published either on the program's website, or in many cases, they may have a linked but separate website because the camp might be a different, business in terms of how it's set up legally. But that has to be posted, and enrollment has to be open. So it's a fair question to ask a coach in terms of, which of the camps you offer would be best for me to attend. But invitation only is going to only be the case, not an ID camp, but a tryout. NAIA programs and D2 programs can actually invite players to come try out with their current teams. Division I programs can't do that. Division III programs can't do that. So that obviously is an invite-only situation, but that's not the same thing as an ID camp. Just saw a question in the chat. How or when can a player get feedback after they attend an ID camp? And that is a great question. The coaches would love to wrap things up efficiently, but if even if it's a small ID combine of just 20 to 30 players, and definitely if it's a larger ID camp, it's just impossible for a coach to spend even just 1 minute with every single player. So, you want to make sure that you've, introduced yourself to that coach and spoken with them at some point during the course of the camp, but don't make a huge deal of needing to speak to them immediately afterwards. It's just not possible, and everybody's tired. I would say that the best thing to do would be to email the coach 24 to 48 hours after the camp, and ask for that feedback, and maybe follow up with a phone call the next week if you haven't gotten anything back from them at that point. You have every right to be persistent in asking for that feedback, but you should give the coaches a little bit of space, because it's just not feasible for us to give our time and attention to everyone who would want it in the camp setting itself. I'm reading another question on the chat. Realistically, how many times does a coach need to see you play, especially if you're out of state? And obviously this situation makes everything more difficult. That is going to vary, because if you are, a second semester junior or going into your senior year, or a first semester senior, and we see you in person, it is theoretically possible that once could be enough. Most coaches that I speak with, and I personally feel the same way, feel like it would be ideal to see you at least 3 times, and preferably 3 to 5. Now, again, if you're looking at an out-of-state school, then how much game film or quality highlight video you've been able to send to us can offset some of that. I'm offering a roster spot next week to a player from New Hampshire who's a second semester junior going into his senior year. And we've only seen him play in person once. The rest of the time has been off of quality game film and video. And then we, have a high level of trust in the coaches that have recommended and mentored that player, and we know what we're getting. But I would say that's probably the absolute minimum, and in general, the exception to the rule. As far as the part of your question about how to deal with this COVID-19 situation, try to use video to make up for the fact that you aren't able to go to a tournament or a camp, during this period of time. And so you're missing out on what would have been a really valuable window of opportunity for us to see you. The person who submitted that question, I hope that answered it, at least mostly. And if not, then type back into the chat again. The next question, yes, go ahead and email us now. And go ahead. I heard someone speaking.
So I wanted to ask, what are you looking for in the highlight videos? Is it just goals, or is it ball possession, away from the ball, stuff like that?
Please do show not only what you do on the ball, but also away from the ball. Like you said, different coaches are going to have a different answer to this, by the way. A highlight video probably needs to be, 3 to 5 minutes, probably not longer than that. But for me personally, I also really like to see game film. If there's maybe a half of a half where you felt like you were really involved in the game, and the film angle is good, where we can see your involvement off the ball as well as on the ball, I think that's really valuable. In terms of the types of highlights, you need to try to show as well-rounded of a perspective as you can on all of the roles of your position. So if you're a center back, then I need to see you making tackles and winning headers, and I also need to see your passing range. It's really hard to show, communication and organization. That's where maybe game film or seeing you live comes into play. But, examples of you covering, so you want to show all of those things. If I get a 5-minute video of a center back and every single highlight is of him building out of the back, that's great. He needs to be able to do that, but it makes me wonder, is he a bad individual defender? Why does he not have any highlights of his tackling or him shielding a player off the ball? If you're a forward, showing different types of finishing, but also your hold-up play, also your movement off the ball, your work rate to press or to drop in and defend in your team's block, whatever the tactics are of your team plays. And when you're making a highlight video, you also need to keep in mind that everything that you are showing us that you can do, you don't really get credit for any of it. You're just proving to us, yes, you can do the things that you're supposed to do. The point is to pique our interest, to watch your game film, or to come see you play in person, or to pay special attention to you when we see you at a tournament or at an ID camp. Nobody's going to be recruited solely on the basis of having a great highlight video, because if you're actually good enough to come play at our school, then of course you can do everything that you're showing us that you can do. You just need to show that there's no holes in your game and check those boxes and get us interested so that we want to see more of the real thing and not just the clips. And then a couple of questions in the chat are about goalkeepers. Watching goalkeepers is tough because if we come to a tournament and watch one of your games and your team is better than the team that you're playing, then we might not see you do anything. So ironically enough, if you're a goalkeeper, we actually want to come see you play in the games where your team is overmatched and you have a lot to do. But I would also encourage you, if you're a goalkeeper, to try to find a way to get some of your training sessions filmed. It's not great, but it can supplement what we might be able to see in a game, because if you send us game film and you punt the ball twice, collect one high ball, make one save, and the ball gets passed back to your feet a couple of times, this is just not a lot for us to go on. So combining that with some examples of you in pressure training is really valuable. And I would say that most programs are probably going to have a goalkeeper coach. And so if there's any way for you to go to an ID camp where you can work with that school's goalkeeper coach, that's going to be really, really beneficial. And if your club has a goalkeeping director, then getting their input is also important. The next question I'll transition into, because I see how much input do you get from club coaches. We will call your club coach, and we might call your high school coach, probably not as likely since that tends to not be as high of a level of play, but don't be surprised if we try to get in touch with a guidance counselor or someone else at the school. We're going to want to talk to multiple adults who know you and whose reputation is on the line when they recommend or don't recommend you to us. Because 3 years from now, SA City is going to need to be able to send Trinity a player, and they can't compromise Trinity's trust in them by giving us a dishonest picture now of a certain player. So, you know, you're going to be, your coaches are always going to stick up for you, but they're going to have to be candid, or at least decline to answer certain questions, and pleading the fifth kind of tells us what we need to know. But that phone call is definitely going to happen, and it's a really important part of the process. Additionally, if I can say this in an indirect way without violating any regulations, if there are periods of time where you are not allowed to be contacted directly by a college coach of a certain division, contacting club coaches can be an indirect means of getting around that. The NCAA is trying to close some of those loopholes too, but there are creative ways that club coaches can help in that part of the process.
We'll take these last two questions real quick on here, and then go ahead and pass it back to you, Coach, so you can talk to us a little bit about the university, if you don't mind.
Okay. So I hope I'm not missing anything, but it looks like these last two questions, the first one, yes, you should prioritize inviting them to club rather than high school games. Now, one of the benefits of high school is that oftentimes there's game film, whereas not every club game is necessarily going to be recorded. So you can certainly take advantage of that for your video. But in terms of inviting a coach to come see you play, I know a lot of coaches who do not recruit high school at all, period. I think that's a little bit snobbish, and I do go recruit at high school games. But with that said, if you're on a high school team that's not that great, you're one of only 2 good players on your team, and there's only 1 or 2 good players on the other team, this is not a great use of my time when I could be going to watch a better game that has more recruitable players. So if you do invite them to a high school game, you want to invite them to the best game on your schedule. But in general, club is a better source of recruitment than high school. high school soccer has some advantages in terms of preparing you for the atmosphere of college soccer and the nature of the game schedule in college soccer, but the level of play and the reliability of evaluation is usually much higher in the club environment. So that's important. And then in terms of recommendation letters, I don't suppose that it hurts, but to be honest, we're probably going to solicit the recommendations that we want as we go through the process. I don't think you need to do that at all in your initial email to a coach unless you are behind the schedule and you're, in your senior year and this is the first time. Then go ahead and include that recommendation as to why a coach should pay attention to it, even though you're behind some of the other, PSAs that we might have been talking to for a long time already. But otherwise, I would say you don't need to do that for an initial email. Maybe it's something that you send later on, but in all likelihood, it won't even be necessary because we'll do that legwork on our end if we have a high enough level of interest in you. Brianna, did I address all of the questions or did I miss anything that you needed me to touch on?
I think there was one question on here, just real quick. It said if you're a multi-sport athlete, is it worth including highlights from other sports to a prospective soccer coach?
No, although mentioning it can be a way to, show more evidence of your athletic ability. But, depending on what seasons those sports are, you may or may not be able to be a multi-sport athlete in college. In Division III, it's doable. In most cases, Division I and Division II, it's not. But in general, I would say a coach is not going to care about that at all. So maybe it's something that you mention on your profile, but I don't think you need to show any highlights of that. And if you do, I don't think a coach is going to bother to watch it.
Perfect. I think that answers the questions in the chat.
Did anyone else want to speak up before we mute again and I give you a little information about my school? Guess not. Okay, so if it's all right, coaches, can I give a little information about Trinity for the last few minutes?
Sure.
Excellent. So Trinity University is a top 100 ranked university in the nation, and both the men's and women's soccer programs are ranked in the top 20 in the nation pretty much every year for the past decade, and in the men's case, 2 decades. Regionally, Trinity has been ranked #1 in the West for, I think, 25 out of the past 27 years or something crazy. Academically, if you get into MIT, then everyone would understand why you would go to MIT. But apart from an Ivy League school, Trinity is right at the top of that second tier of elite universities. We are a small, private liberal arts university, but a lot of liberal arts universities are not particularly well known for being strong in the hard sciences. And we also are very strong in our engineering and pre-med departments. For example, the university just a few years ago put in a new $100 million science building and with a $1.3 billion endowment that's going towards the quality of facilities and towards, your education. It's a first-class academic environment. Small class sizes also is a huge contributor to that. The faculty to the student to faculty ratio is 9-to-1. Most of your classes will have somewhere between 12 and 20 students. Very, very few at the top end of that or larger than that, and potentially senior seminars smaller than that. So, you're going to get to know your professors. They're going to get to know you. And it's a great academic environment. It's much easier to learn in that type of a tutoring setting. And another thing that sets us apart from a lot of our academic peers is that many other schools that are similar to us, the illustrious faculty that you read about on their website you can go there for 4 years and never actually meet those professors because they're just doing research. But all of our professors teach, and all of our professors also keep open office hours where students can go by and visit with them and get tutoring or talk about their subject. So the accessibility of the professors is a huge thing. In terms of the soccer programs, the women's program has reached the national quarterfinals 7 times in the past 21 years, reached the Final Four 3 times, and made it to the national championship game in 2013. They've been to the NCAA tournament for 11 straight years. In just the past 10 years alone, not only has the team succeeded on the field, but individual players have succeeded both on and off the field. Our women's program has had 9 All-Americans, 19 academic All-Americans, and 5 NCAA postgraduate scholarship recipients in just the past 10 years. The men's record is extremely impressive, but not quite at that level. We've only had 13 All-Americans and 8 academic All-Americans in the past 8 years, but still way more than any other college soccer program. Our men hold the national record all time for all divisions of NCAA college soccer with 18 straight NCAA tournament appearances. We've been to the Sweet 16 16 times since 1998, so the past 22 years, and we've been to the national quarterfinals 10 times in the past 22 years. Coach McGinley is going into his 30th season in charge of the program, and our women's head coach, Dylan Harrison, hasn't been around for as long, but he's a Trinity alum. So in both cases, it's all in the family. Our men's program holds a couple of other records as well under Coach McGinley. We have the longest consecutive winning streak in men's or women's college soccer history with 43 straight wins, 2002 through 2004, and also the longest streak of consecutive home victories at 47, which spans 5 seasons. So we had a senior class that didn't lose a single home game over the course of their 4 years. We've sent 3 alumni to play in Major League Soccer. Lance Key played with the Colorado Rapids after being a 3-time All-American at Trinity. He's now the head coach of the Division I women's soccer program at the University of Louisiana. An outstanding man and coach, and still the best striker of a driven ball that I've ever played with in alumni games. He's still putting 70-yard switches of play on a rope. I played with Kyle Altman for 3 years. He was 1 year ahead of me. He was our team captain. He was drafted in the MLS Combine to play with the New England Revolution. After playing with them, he moved to Minnesota United, which is now obviously an MLS club, but back then they were in the NASL, and he was the team captain of Minnesota when they won the NASL League Championship. And then most recently, Lawrence Wyke with Atlanta United, who moved up through their USL program and is now playing with their full first team in the MLS. We've had several other players that have gone into the USL ranks also, and an obvious one obviously is Matt Cardone, who's the starting goalkeeper for San Antonio FC. And we've had others as well further back in terms of history. So it's a great university academically, and you can get elite academics and elite athletics at Trinity. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got a very diverse roster with not only players from across the state of Texas, but players from New York, California, Connecticut, and Florida, as well as players from Mexico, England, Scotland, Iceland, and the Netherlands. And university-wide, there's almost 70 foreign countries represented in our school's enrollment, which is about 2,500 students. We're located pretty near downtown, 5 minutes from the Alamo, 5 minutes from the airport. So it's a great location. And I think there's a lot of additional information on the page that Brianna linked you to that I would encourage you to go check out. It's a beautiful campus and a great environment for, committed student athletes to look at their player development and academic development over the next 4 years. If anyone has any specific questions about Trinity, I would be glad to take those also.
We don't have any specific questions. Coach Cartee, if you don't mind, I'll link your email on that same webpage. So if they want to reach out to you, they'll have access via email. And if you guys want to direct any questions, there anything at this time? Any last questions?
Trinity is a Division III program. In answer to that chat question, we are competing in the same division as Claremont, Messiah, Tufts, schools like that. In terms of playing style, both our men and our women, I think, are fairly similar in terms of being a possession-oriented team, though not a tiki-taka team. We try to advance the ball as quickly as we can, but always through keeping possession, connecting passes on the floor. We tend to commit a lot of numbers into the attack, and hold a fairly high line and press pretty high and pretty hard to try to get possession back as quickly as we can if we lose it. There's a lot of individual freedom of expression within the system, but definitely combination play and movement off the ball is a huge emphasis. And all of what I just said is true, but hopefully you come actually see us play and you see it for yourself this fall. All of our home games are free admission throughout the regular season. When you get to the NCAA tournament, we're required to charge. But all of our home games are also streamed live from our website. So I don't know why you wouldn't be able to make it in person since you're local, but if you couldn't, you could at least tune in and watch. It's a good question that you just asked. It's a good question to ask any coach. A lot of coaches are probably going to give you an answer that sounds good. It's worth your while to try to see if you can find a stream or go see them play live, because do they actually keep it on the floor and try to play out a pressure in the back when they're down 1-0 in a must-win conference game in the 80th minute? Or do decisions look different than what they told you they want to do when the pressure is on? So you need to try to go see that in person. I'm seeing a follow-up question about freshman playing time. I suppose there might be some programs that really have a seniority system, but I think it's too competitive of a landscape, and in most cases that wouldn't be true. At Trinity, if you are good enough, you're old enough. Last year we had 3 freshmen that started, which is very difficult to do, but they were talented, motivated, and outcompeted the older players to earn those spots. And we actually had 2 seniors that didn't even make travel rosters. We went on trips and they didn't make the 24. We left them behind. So it's an extremely competitive environment. You can never rest on your laurels. You have never earned the right to be excused for consistent poor performances. How you do each week in training is going to determine how much you play. And, especially for a Division I or Division II program, oftentimes the coach's job is on the line based on the results. So, your attitude should always be, putting the team first and trying to help the team win anyway. But from the coach's point of view, they're going to do what they think gives their team the best chance to win. If you playing gives the team the best chance to win, you're going to play. And if other players give the team a better chance, then you might not, and you're going to have to compete harder in training for that opportunity. It is very, very serious in that sense. Probably don't have much more time, but I see a question about next ID camps. Trinity is hoping to hold our summer ID camp July 31st through August 2nd. Those dates are still waiting to be officially confirmed as the university kind of waits to see how the the virus situation unfolds. But if we're able to open by then, which we certainly hope to, then that would be the next opportunity. And Brianna linked to the camp website where you would be able to see that information. I'm also seeing a question about finishing in 4 years. If you pick the school the right way, then you should finish all 4 years. All of our players do, with very few transfers. But if you pick a school for the wrong reasons, or if there's a coaching change or something like that, possibly not. But you want to get it right so that you can do that. And in most cases, we're not going to be recruiting a player that we don't see having 4 years of contribution for us, because it's great if you're an immediate impact player, but realistically, you come in as a freshman to compete. But sophomore, junior, and senior year are when you probably are going to have an even better chance of playing even more. So you want to think about that for sure. Pick the school for the academics and for the right fit in terms of the other characteristics, because if you tear your ACL or break your leg, you can't be on suicide watch. If all you're doing every day is going to class and going to rehab, then you need to be happy with the school that you've chosen.
Coach Cartee, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an exceptional inside look here at Trinity University. Thank you for sharing your expertise in the recruiting process and the ID camps. Took a lot of notes today, learned a lot. So thank you very much. I hope this benefited all the players that joined us and families. We have the session recorded and we'll be able to share it with our membership as well. Next week, we have a second interview series with Coach Cartee, and he's also going to talk about a little bit more about player qualities that he looks for and dive into that, and also his program, his state championship program at Central Catholic High School. We also have on the line today Sebastian Giraldo, who's our new Director of Coaching and Methodology. He's waving his hand there. We have a town hall this Saturday at 4 p.m. And those invites went out to the membership so they could sign up. We're expecting quite the crowd for Sebastian. So we look forward to that. I want to thank our fantastic hosts today in Brianna Pedroza and Kerwin Johnson for the great questions and making sure that the session carried forward in a nice way. Well done, guys. So thank you.
Also, Adriano, just to follow up on the RSVP for the town hall meeting, it's live on our homepage. So there's still a chance if you just fill out the form real quick, let us know that you're going to be there virtually on Saturday. It would help us just to get a head count. So just go to sacitysc.com homepage, and then you can fill out that form real quick for us.
Wonderful. Kerwin, any closing thoughts?
Thank you, Coach Cartee, for your knowledge and your time, your efforts. We really appreciate it. It was awesome.
Thanks so much for having me, and everybody stay healthy and safe.
You too. Thank you, guys. Good night. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Good night, everybody.